For past Sorokin for the second consecutive game and for the 16th consecutive season, your Pittsburgh Penguins are headed to the Stanley Cup playoffs. This is Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live, and I'm your host, Matt Gajtka. Yes, back at it once again. Won't be able to do a show on Saturday after the game against the Bruins at TD Garden, so this will be my last show for about a week's time. So I definitely wanted to get on and chat with you all after a regulation victory. How about that? It is possible. It has been a while since that 11-3 win against the Red Wings, believe it or not. What was that now? Almost 3 weeks ago? Getting close to 3 weeks, in fact. It will be 3 weeks on Sunday. Not the type of run you want to have for a team that's headed into the postseason, trying to build some positive momentum, but maybe there was an ancillary, unexpected reason why the Penguins have been sagging recently. We'll get to that in just a little bit. Also, another huge performance from the Penguins' top line, and an intriguing combination there. Looks like it could be something, and especially right now with Malkin out due to suspension, no reason to go away from that if you're Mike Sullivan. And also Tristan Jarry back in the net for the first time in a couple of games. So he gives up 3, but a couple of them late, garbage time. I think overall, pretty strong performance against an Islanders team that threw 39 shots at the Penguins, and an Islanders team that came out strong in the second period, reversing the script from Tuesday night on Long Island when the Penguins pushed back, except the Penguins were actually able to tie it in that second period. The Islanders could not get any closer than 2-1. Zach Parise scored another goal against the Penguins. Go figure. But Pittsburgh never trailed in this one. And nice to have a game like that once in a while. And maybe this illness, norovirus, stomach flu, whatever has been going through the Penguins, perhaps that's as much to blame for their sag in recent weeks, their inability to put together full games than anything else. Although tonight, like I said, the Isles were quite impressive, and they controlled the game from about the midway point of it until, I'll say roughly halfway through the third period when the Penguins were able to get that fourth goal and really put things away. Walt Flanagan is here. Hello, Walt. Good to see you. He says, look at that. Playing a simple game gets good results and scores many goals. This and the last 2 games have looked more like the good Penguins, not the team on that awful stretch of bad, unwatchable hockey. I think there's a lot to that. And I think sometimes playing a team like the Islanders can focus you as well. Forces you to not try to make too much out of nothing in a lot of situations, because they know they're going to be pretty centrally located. They're going to pack it in. They're going to defend fairly well, although this Islanders team not playing for anything right now, technically still alive for the playoffs, but at least I think they are. They might have actually been knocked out by the Penguins tonight, come to think of it. I was so focused on Pittsburgh scenarios, I didn't think about the Islanders, so forgive me there, but they're realistic. You saw some laughter on the bench tonight for the Isles, including Barry Trotz actually cracking a smile during a game. Not sure I've seen that ever before. So things are a little looser for New York than they usually are, at least as far as they usually have been over the past 3 or 4 years with Trotz in charge. So different animal for sure, but it's still the Islanders, and they still gave the Penguins a couple of hard-fought games this week in this home and home. And the Penguins took care of business. Jake Guentzel scoring 2 more goals. His pursuit of 40 continues on, so he's got 4 in his past 2. Danton Heinen scored in consecutive games. Yes, Danton Heinen connects, so depth scoring heard from for the Penguins. And Chris Letang scored the opening goal as well, in addition to Crosby getting on the board. So I guess fitting in that Crosby and Letang have never missed the playoffs as Penguins, they've never missed the playoffs together as Penguins. Sid did miss the playoffs in his first year, you'll recall, that disaster of a season after the full year lockout, and the Penguins had to rejigger that one on the fly, hiring Mike Therrien to replace Ed Olczyk, and from 2006-07 on, they have not missed the playoffs since. So Letang, Crosby, and Malkin, when they have been together in a given season, they have made the playoffs, and it's the longest streak in North American professional sports. I want to dig into that in just a second as well. But as for the details, like I mentioned, Tristan Jarry making 36 saves in the win against the Isles, and no goaltending controversy. I did find it interesting that Casey DeSmith got back-to-back starts for the first time all season right here near the end of the year. But still time for Jarry to get back into a rhythm, and I'm not sure he was necessarily tested a ton with grade A chances, and the Islanders missed a couple. One hit the crossbar, one slid right through the crease with an open net situation early in the third period that could have made things a little more interesting. But hey, a win is a win, and after this recent stretch, I don't think we're going to look that gift horse in the mouth at all, are we? As the Penguins get to 97 points and move 5 points ahead of the Caps, who still have 2 games in hand, but the Caps got bombed by Toronto tonight. I think that game is over. Well, it was over about halfway through, with the Leafs trouncing the Caps, who just trounced the Flyers the other night. So seeing some of these high-scoring games pop up late in the season, pretty typical, as you have some teams playing other teams who are out of it, like we saw with the Caps and the Flyers the other night, or this game with the Pens and the Isles. Not so much with the Leafs and the Capitals, but both teams know they're in the playoffs. That's more to my point there. So sometimes you do see games get away at this stage of the year when teams don't quite have that fight to hang in there all the way through. Gaming with Geo says, hey, Matt, if you ever need a co-host, let me know. I'm cool. I don't doubt that you're cool, Geo, but I do like to fly solo for most of these shows. Actually trying to find maybe a guest or two for down the stretch here. Like I mentioned, no show coming up on Saturday, but back on the air next Thursday when the Pens host the Bruins. It should be another difficult and challenging home coming up here against another Eastern Conference rival, as now the Penguins can safely say they are in the playoffs. And still a toss-up as to who they might face. Could be the Rangers. That seems to be the most likely right now in a 2 versus 3 Metro Division matchup. Could be the Canes in first place in the Metro if they fall far enough back, or the Rangers find a way to catch Carolina. Looking more unlikely, but still that's a possibility. And could still be the Florida Panthers in a crossover game. And again, that's assuming if the Penguins do fall to 4th place in the Metro Division. All right, let's talk about some of the details tonight. And, well, first of all, we'll talk about who drew into the lineup and who drew out. It was actually a repeat of the lineup from Tuesday night, but for a change, the Penguins got full 60 minutes from Brian Rust and Evan Rodriguez, both of whom had to hit the showers, or maybe I should say the toilets, early at UBS Arena on Tuesday. I hate to laugh. I just had the stomach flu last month, but something about that brand of illness that can lead to more jokes than other kinds. Hey, in this year, in the last 2 years, just glad it's not COVID, and glad that it's something that can pass through the team, pun intended, but maybe it has passed through the team and made things more difficult for the team in order to keep their energy up. Mike Sullivan admitted after Tuesday's game that several of his players have fought through in some of these recent tilts to stay at least on the bench and try to get through it. Of course, Rust and Rodriguez decided to call it quits early. And, hey, if you're in intestinal distress in an NHL hockey game, I'm not sure how good you are going to be to your team. I'm not sure how much use you're going to be to your team. So not blaming them for that, but it was nice to see both of those gentlemen on the ice for full games tonight. And Marcus Pettersson sat out in favor of Mark Friedman. So that's a development to look at and wonder about. I think I still like Pettersson because of his reach, but I also think that Pettersson, along with Brian Dumoulin, have been pretty one-dimensional this season, and in the case of Dumoulin, his one-dimension defense has fallen by the wayside here lately. So a little bit of a respite from that tonight, but remember, the Islanders did almost get to 40 shots here, so it wasn't like it was a brilliant defensive performance, and they do allow the 3 goals on top of that. But, hey, it's time to experiment, I think, if you're Mike Sullivan, with defense pairings especially. I think Mike Matheson is still performing well, and he appears to, I don't want to say be the Penguins' best defenseman, but he's hit a run of good form, and I'm happy to see that because I think he can add a lot if he's playing responsibly, which for the most part he has. Chris Letang scored tonight. He is, believe it or not, the active defenseman in the NHL with the most points against the Islanders career-wise. That's his 13th goal against the Islanders that he scored in the first period through a screen. Nice little tiny wrist shot. Didn't try to get too fancy with it. Just put it on net, and it drifted by Ilya Sorokin. That gave the Pens the lead. That's his 41st career point for Chris Letang against the Islanders in his career. And remember, some of those years were against sad sack Islanders teams or teams that didn't defend very well. The points are coming a little bit more difficult against New York in recent seasons. Danton Heinen has 16 goals. I didn't think it was that much, actually. I had to do a double check on that one. And we saw Jason Zucker take a shot off the hand late in the first period, blocking a shot, be returned for the second. Chad Ruido blocked a shot late in the third with his hand, and he didn't look very comfortable there. I know that kind of thing happens almost every game at the NHL level, but worth noting as we get close to the postseason when these sorts of things happen. Particularly Ruido, who may not be the perfect defenseman in any stretch of the imagination, but pretty solid throughout the season for the Pens. So we hate to see him drop out, but if that's the case, then Marcus Pettersson can step in. So the Pens do have that luxury, I suppose, right now since they've been playing Mark Friedman so much. But I was talking about experimenting on the defensive side of things. I think that the forward unit that Mike Sullivan's put over the boards to start games, to go on the attack and to try to tilt the ice. I'm talking about Crosby, Rakell, and Guentzel in the last 3 games, really, because that combination came together late against the Predators in that come-from-behind win on Sunday. I think that's a winning combination. Greg Revac, one of my friends, and someone I've done a few shows with here, a few Pittsburgh Postgame shows on this channel, he was saying that Rakell brings a lot of what Brian Rust brings, except a little bit more of a finesse game where he can hang on to the puck. Not saying that he's a finesse player, but he's able to do a little more stick handling wise to keep possession, and he's also bigger than Brian Rust, so his reach is quite valuable too. I didn't really anticipate Rakell being that much of a presence, I suppose, a physical presence, but he is out there. You just look at him, and he's one of the tallest Penguins for sure, well over 6 feet, and he puts that range to use. And I've been impressed with not just his ability to find the soft spots and also to find Crosby a couple of times for some open chances, but also his ability to slow the game down, maybe at times, delay and drift and wait for Crosby and Guentzel to find their places, find their positions. So Rakell adds an extra dimension to that line that maybe Brian Rust could not. So I'm happy to see that line continue to thrive. Rakell nearly had another goal tonight. Crosby scored on a 2-on-0 with Jake Guentzel, but throughout the night that line was buzzing for sure. Also don't want to leave out Brock McGinn, scored an empty net goal, one of 2 empty net goals for the Penguins this year. Where they had like 3 or 4 games with multiple empty net goals. It's I was going to say a pandemic. It's an epidemic. Pandemic. Maybe don't use that one in any other sense, but the real thing. But you're seeing teams, obviously, in recent years, especially this year, pull their goalies a little earlier and leave them off the ice more than we've ever seen in the past. So the empty netters are piling up, and Jake Guentzel and Brock McGinn say, thank you very much. The Brock Star, yeah, Gio calls him. I don't want to say that I'm a huge Brock McGinn fan. I don't like giving bottom 6 forwards, which is what Brock McGinn is, multi-year contracts, multi-million-dollar contracts for multi-years, for that matter. But I also understand that sometimes you got to pay to get the player you want, and that's the player that Ron Hextall and the Penguins targeted last offseason. And I guess so far so good, but in a lot of ways, even though he's been able to put some pucks in the net, and he did start off hot in terms of finishing, if you look at his on-ice effects as far as expected goals and just plain old shot attempts, he's one of the worst Penguins, if not the worst Penguin at 5-on-5. So, yeah, some of that is the fact that he's going out there against some top lines for the opposition and playing more of a defensive role. But he's not exactly Teddy Bluger either in that sense. So, yeah, I think the jury's still out on McGinn, but he does bring energy. And as I was saying earlier on Twitter today, in fact, I was saying that the Penguins play a style in which you need to have one of those retrievers on the ice, for lack of a better term. Don't want to make these guys into dogs, but you know what I mean. I think a retriever is a noble dog, for sure. It brings the energy, for sure. That's my point. So maybe on the Crosby line, it could be Rakell. I'm not sure I ever thought of him that way, but in terms of the second and third and fourth lines for the Penguins, you can have guys like Jason Zucker and Brock McGinn who can get into the corner, get to the front of the net, and break up plays, put pressure on. The Penguins have to have a strong forecheck if they're going to do well, if they're going to go deep in the playoffs. So perhaps Brock McGinn, even the underlying numbers aren't everything for him if he is finding a way to make life easier for his line mates, although in theory that would come out, that would show itself. It would be evident in some of those numbers if he were. But still time for him to get back into the groove here late in the regular season, and the most important thing is the Penguins are looking pretty healthy right now, and with Malkin having a bit of an unexpected, unscheduled rest late in the season, he's got a chance to spruce up and to maybe work on some conditioning, and not that he was out of shape or anything, but he can get all cylinders pumping as we get ready for the playoffs. He'll come back with, I think 5 games left before the postseason. Tonight, Sidney Crosby and Jake Guentzel teamed up for, several more points. I think Sid had 3 and Guentzel had 4. Crosby now with 11 seasons at 80-plus points. That's the most among active NHL players. And I think we saw some of that angry Sid tonight. He was feisty. He was face-washing Brock McGinn. I'm not even sure it was a face-wash. It was more of a rabbit punch from behind. I don't like to see that necessarily because, well, number one, I put the Penguins shorthanded because it was detected by the referees. But number two, I don't really want to see Sid mixing it up too much with the opposition, especially in front of their bench where he's going to be outnumbered, and you never know what might happen. Late in the regular season, I know this game clinched the playoffs, but it wasn't the most meaningful game of the year either. Those are still to come. But maybe Sid needs to play with more of an edge to find that extra edge in his game. So we have seen it before where Sid gets pissed off and suddenly the other team is pissed off because he's pumped in a few goals or a few points on the score sheet. We saw him against the Predators look like a man possessed, to use a Mike Langism. And even though Malkin was the one who boiled over and ended up getting the suspension, Crosby was also feisty in that game. And here we go now 2 games down the line, and Sid again has put up multiple points in each of the last 3 games. And like I said, has crested 80 despite playing less than 70 games this season. And at 1.25 points per game, that actually might be closer to 1.3 now after tonight. This is the second best scoring rate of the past 8 seasons, courtesy of Wes Crosby. Saw that research, so good job there, Wes, to dig that one up. This is not a player fading off into the sunset at age 34. Certainly not. Walt Flanagan also says hello with another comment. There was a reason why Kunitz and Dupuis had as long of careers as they did. They fit those retriever banger roles for 87. Yeah, and both had decent enough hands to also capitalize on chances and be able to put together some of those combination passing plays that Sidney Crosby likes to be able to do when he's out there. But primarily, yes, they were energy guys with skill, but energy guys nonetheless. And I think Kunitz certainly fit that era of the NHL a little bit better. I think he'd have a hard time laying as many hits as he did, but I think he was still just as smart as anybody I've ever seen in a Penguins jersey. Chris Kunitz, one of my favorite Penguins of all time, in fact, for that reason. I thought he was underrated, and, especially nationally. He got such a bad rap after the 2014 Olympics when he made the Olympics, and I was so satisfied when he scored the last goal of the game against Henrik Lundqvist and the Swedes in that gold medal game to punctuate it. But I know a lot of folks thought that he was just riding Sid's coattails. And, yeah, in some ways, for sure, Crosby made Kunitz's career what it was. In a lot of ways, he did. But Chris Kunitz was not chopped liver on that line with Crosby all those years. And same goes for Pascal Dupuis. And, they played together for, I want to say, the better part of 5 seasons. And the combination was almost always effective. And it was almost always something the Penguins could rely upon, whether it was Dan Bilesma coaching or Mike Johnston or a little bit on into the Mike Sullivan era before Pascal Dupuis called it a career. I'm not saying this line right now for the Penguins, the Crosby line, is going to be able to match that for production, but it's a different feel. And, Jake Guentzel's a different kind of player, too. He's a pure finisher. He's handsy guy, nifty guy, smart, much like Kunitz and Dupuis. So you got to have a head on your shoulders to play with Crosby. And it appears that Raquel does, and they appear to be finding each other in places on the ice instinctively. So that's great to see because they've only played 2 full games together, 2.5, I suppose, if you count the Nashville game. Let's see what else is in the notebook here tonight. Again, this is Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Remember to like and subscribe. I have a new microphone tonight. The last one failed me. So, and thanks to Walt for noting that a couple of shows ago. And we're continuing to improve the product here as we gear up for the playoffs, which we can definitely count upon. 16 straight seasons. Yeah, I wanted to talk about that too because, yes, obviously the Penguins had some good fortune when they rebuilt, tore everything down, and there's no guarantee any team that tears it down is going to have that kind of fortune with Crosby and Malkin both available. Actually, reverse order, as you well know if you're watching the show, they should probably know that Malkin was drafted first, even though Malkin showed up in Pittsburgh second due to events outside of his control, and did kind of an espionage act to get away from his Magnitogorsk KHL team, or I guess it was the Russian Super League at that time, and fled in the dark of night in Helsinki, Finland, to get his way to the Penguins. But neither here nor there. I always like to remind people that Malkin sacrificed quite a lot to get here. When people question his commitment and all of that, just remember what he gave up to get to Pittsburgh and what he's going through right now as well. It can't be easy for him. I feel bad for all the innocent Russian citizens tangled up in this international mess, this war that Russia's putting on. But I digress. Anyway, 16 straight seasons. Let's talk about happier things for the Penguins in the playoffs. Despite having Crosby and Malkin and Chris Letang, certainly one of the top defenders of his generation, despite having Marc-Andre Fleury for the better part of this era, close to 10 seasons? I think it was over 10 seasons that he was a Penguin. Certainly was, in fact, now that I do the math in my head. But it's no guarantee that you're going to be able to just roll into the playoffs year after year. Look at the Blackhawks. Look at the Kings. Look at teams who've won multiple cups, who've been in contention. The Bruins have missed a couple of playoffs along the way. They've been the closest to matching the Penguin streak during this time frame. Strong teams that have ebbed and flowed, as is the plan. That's really how salary cap leagues are designed, but the Penguins have flouted that, partially because Crosby and Malkin are that damn good, but partially because of good coaching over the years, because of great supporting teammates, because of general managers who've been able to help bolster what Crosby and Malkin bring to the table. And yeah, there's some good luck in there as well. What was it, 2014-15? The Penguins probably picked the worst coach in terms of a match for the lineup they were throwing out there. And, Ray Shero had left not a lot in the tank there for Jim Rutherford in his first season. They had to win at Buffalo, the final game of the regular season, to make the playoffs. That was the closest call, and it's commendable. That's their only real close call over these 16 years. 2020 was weird, too, because they were in a regular playoff position when the season was put on pause due to the pandemic. But that first round against the Habs wasn't really called the playoffs. It was called the play-in round. So I'm not sure how we were going to deal with that. I guess we're just saying that's a playoff berth, and I'm okay with that, considering they were in the spot they needed to be in when the pandemic did strike. So the Penguins have been there, and this isn't basketball. This isn't football where you have a great quarterback that can cure a lot of ills. Yes, Crosby and Malkin down the middle, that's probably the position you want to have your best players at, and both are surefire first-ballot Hall of Famers. Crosby's in contention for one of the top 5 players of all time in the NHL, and I don't think that's a terribly controversial statement. But they still only play about a third of the game, maybe approaching close to half if it's a really special teams heavy situation or some extenuating circumstances. But for the most part, they're playing 20 minutes a night. They're not influencing the game like a LeBron James or a Kevin Durant or Steph Curry can in the NBA. Baseball, I think, is a better comparison to this because you have a guy like Mike Trout who's made the playoffs one time. It's maybe not quite as egalitarian or democratic as baseball, but hockey, you have to spread the wealth. You have to spread the ice time, more specifically. And you cannot just put the ball in the hands of Crosby and Malkin and let them go do their thing. Hockey's a chaotic game, in addition to the fact that players don't play more than 20-some-odd minutes a night these days, especially if you're a forward. It's 20, 22. That's about as much as you'll see in a given night that doesn't go to overtime. So it's not just about the stars, not just about getting draft lottery luck or tanking and all that. It did help, and that's the reason they've been able to go over the top and win these Stanley Cups. But so many folks who've been with the Penguins organization over the years deserve some credit. Even guys like Bilesman and Shero, whose tenures didn't end very well. They kept the line moving. They gave the team a chance year after year. Heck, even Mike Johnston gave the team a chance, I suppose, in some ways, in 2014-15. And, I hear a lot of criticism of Mike Sullivan. He's not beyond criticism. But if he's not a good coach, who is a good coach in the NHL? That's the question that I would have for those of you out there. So we are fortunate as Penguins fans to watch this team. I definitely didn't take for granted my time covering the team as a journalist as well. And it's going to be able to talk about them again on a regular basis because it's the team I followed the closest since I was a young kid. It's the reason I love hockey the best. out of all the sports, it's the Penguins. And it was Jágr and Lemieux at first, and Mike Lang too. Don't sell him short when it comes to evangelizing for the sport. But talk about consolidating. And Crosby and Malkin were the first two superstars that I've followed that have been younger than me. So felt a little closer to them than I ever did, I guess, to Jágr and Lemieux. It's just natural when you're in that same generational cohort to feel that way. I know there are so many folks out there like me, and now the younger generation, the younger millennials, the exennials, whatever you want to call them too, they've been able to experience winning playoff hockey year after year after year. And, well, now the goal is to actually win a playoff round for the first time in 4 seasons. It's been difficult in the first round. I think last year was the most frustrating because the Penguins control play against the Islanders, but goaltending let them down. So you hope that Jarry has made some progress here. I think he has, for sure. In fact, here's a fun fact. Tristan Jarry has beaten the Islanders 10 times in the regular season. He's the winningest active goalie against the Islanders in the NHL. So Chris Letang has the most points against the Isles among active NHL defensemen, and Tristan Jarry has the most wins, for whatever that stat is worth, but the most wins against the Isles among active goaltenders. Let me see what else is in here. I mentioned Jason Zucker getting injured but then coming back, so wipe your brow on that one. I think he's more important than most folks give him credit for. Also, earlier today, this news dropped yesterday, Kevin Weeks of the NHL Network and other outlets put this one on Twitter, but we suspected the Penguins were going to play the Bruins in a Winter Classic, if not next year, then maybe in the near future, because of the purchase of the Penguins by the Fenway Sports Group, and it is coming to pass. The Penguins and the Bruins at Fenway Park next New Year's Day. It's the first Winter Classic for the Penguins, believe it or not, since 2011 when they hosted the Capitals at Heinz Field in a game that shall not be mentioned from here on out. We all know what happened there. That was just a gloomy day all around in so many ways for the Pens. And you remember the Penguins in the first Winter Classic in 2007, beating the Sabres in a shootout up at what was then Ralph Wilson Stadium. And so now the Penguins won't get a chance to host a Winter Classic, but they've hosted a stadium series in the interim against the Flyers. That was a good time back in 2017. And they'll be back on Winter Classic ice at Fenway Park. Fenway hosts its second Winter Classic. And the Bruins, I think, host their third. They've hosted now, or they will have hosted 2 at Fenway Park. They played the Flyers in 2010, and then they also played Montreal at Gillette Stadium. I wasn't a fan of that venue. That was, 3 or 4, maybe 5 years back. So, yeah, the Bruins, certainly one of the favorite franchises in the NHL, much like the Penguins are, because they draw eyeballs. Don't get offended, folks. That's just how it goes. Boston's a huge market, and Pittsburgh's a big hockey market. And, well, much like a Buffalo, which has appeared in its own couple of Winter Classic games, the Penguins and the city of Pittsburgh punches above its weight when it comes to getting folks to tune in. Walt Flanagan has a good question. I wanted to talk about broadcasting a little bit. Has the NHL felt like it's a bigger deal this year with ESPN, ABC, and TNT? I feel like it has. I genuinely felt NBC was harmful for the past 2 to 3 seasons, and that was Walt's opinion there. I agree. I don't want to say that NBC mailed it in because guys like Doc Emmerich are consummate pros, but I think they just got into a rut. And what we're seeing on ESPN and TNT is just more personality, first and foremost. I've enjoyed that. Love him or hate him, John Buccigross brings the passion about hockey to the screen when he's on there. Kevin Weeks, same way. It's been fun seeing Ryan Callahan as well get an opportunity. Leah Hextall's called some games for ESPN, so breaking some barriers there as far as gender behind the mic in the NHL. And TNT, yeah, they go a little wild on the intermissions at times, and it can get a little inside jokey if you're not watching all the time. But they're trying too. They're trying to make it a different type of product. And first of all, Walt, I love the fact that the NHL decided, okay, we're not going to do what we did last media rights deal, where they signed on for 10 years on just NBC and NBC's family of networks. No, you got to spread it around. No other league can find themselves to one broadcasting entity, if you will, in that way. So getting on Turner Sports in addition to ESPN and ABC, which are the same company, but they do feel like different networks as well at times. I think that was a big deal. And I do feel like the league has gotten more exposure from it. I know there's some complaints about too many games on ESPN+, but you know what, folks? That's just the way of modern sports right now. A lot of baseball games are going to be on, Apple TV, I believe. Amazon Prime's picking up NFL games exclusively. So it's not just the NHL that's going through the streaming-only situation here. So I realize it's not as easy as it might have been back in the day to know where the games are, but if you pay just a little bit of attention, it's not too difficult. And for me, out of market, I've really enjoyed the ESPN Plus product. I'm watching more hockey than ever this year. And the standalone shows, the In the Crease highlight show, and the Point, I guess you call it more maybe a magazine type of a program every Thursday on ESPN Plus. Those have brought more legitimacy to the NHL. And I know they're going to be fighting with basketball and baseball now for eyeballs for the next 2 to 3, 4 months, going to the end of the playoffs. I guess 3 months. It's not quite that long. But I think it's worth it to be on a platform that gets more eyeballs. And, hey, it's hard to dispute the fact that you go to a lot of hotels even these days and you can't find what was once NBC Sports Network on there. It was never a given. I'll say that when you went on the road. It is a given to know that you'll be able to access ESPN and ESPN2, for that matter, and ABC wherever you go, sports bar, hotel, et cetera, et cetera. So that's significant as well. And I think it has been a net positive for the NHL, even though I know some of you out there do disagree, and some might have felt like having your own network, to put it in so many words, with NBC and that crew was advantageous in some ways. I won't argue with that, and NBC did some good things. We can debate whether the Between the Benches analyst was that big of an innovation, but the Winter Classic was certainly a big deal, and NBC was a huge part in getting that on the air. So kudos to them. And like I said, Mike Emmerich was great. I like Ed Olczyk more than most, so I thought they were a good combination over the years. Could have done with a lot less Pierre Maguire and Mike Milbury and Keith Jones. But I'm happy to see Liam McHugh get that hosting gig for the pregame, the postgame, and the intermissions on TNT. And I say give TNT some more time as well. They've grown on me. I like what Rick Tocchet brings. He's kind of the serious analysis, if you will. Anson Carter has a nice personality. Paul Bissonnette, off the wall, for sure. They bring in some celebrities. They go far afield. I know if you're a Penguins fan just looking for Penguins analysis at the intermission and you're on TNT, it's not going to be like that. Let's just lay that out there. But that show's not necessarily for you. It's for the casual fan, the fan that's maybe trying to get more into the NHL and understand what it's all about. And Walt does remind as well, the Pirates won again today. Yes, they did. I guess they're one of the top-hitting teams in the league less than a week into the MLB season. All right, it's been great times chatting with all of you. The Penguins beat the Islanders 6-3 on Pittsburgh postgame. I've been breaking it all down. Thanks to Gio and Walt for the comments. You guys are great, keeping the conversation lively. And again, like and subscribe on Pittsburgh Sports Live so you know when we're going live. My next live show is going to be next Thursday. Won't be able to do the show on Saturday. Now that I'm a dad, I've got skating lessons and soccer games on Saturdays, especially Saturday afternoons. Those are difficult. Hopefully in the playoffs I'll be able to carve out some time if there are some weekday or weekend afternoon games, which we know there usually are, at least one per series, but hoping for a good draw when it comes down time for that. We're still a couple weeks away, still some regular season action to go, and the Penguins bounced back. Maybe it was just the stomach flu that was holding them down, because second period accepted. They looked pretty solid against the Islanders tonight, and they dispatched the Isles. Always fun to beat a team that's tortured the Penguins over the years in several playoff runs. Whether you're an old-timer or a newbie, you've been hurt by the Islanders if you are a Penguins fan. I'll put it that way. So take that, New York. After the shootout loss the other night, hey, the Penguins got 3 out of 4 in terms of points against the Islanders, so pretty good. And now they can truly look ahead to the playoffs. Talk to you next time. God bless. Good night. This has been Pittsburgh Postgame.